Hey everyone, welcome to Zone in Canada. I'm your host Jesse Betteridge. Joining me live in person is Ultra Clystron himself, Karl Olson. Karl?
Hi everybody. Nice to actually have you here today.
Nice to actually have you on the show. It doesn't happen too much these days, but
it still happens enough that it's like its own playlist now on SoundCloud. Listen to it.
It's true. You can go check that out.
It's really just so that all of my music listeners can decide to listen to it now. I can plug the playlist.
No issues with that here. So it's February 2020. A few news stories have already built up that could shape out in interesting ways throughout the year. We're just going to kind of go back and talk about a few of them. Now, if you've listened to the show for any amount of time, you know that we are terrible at predicting things.
We're the worst.
I think we have maybe accurately predicted one or two things, maybe, and yet the
only time we get something right is when we have insider dirt and we're just alluding to it. We'll keep it 100.
That never happens, Karl. What are you talking about? So because of that, we often fall into the trap of speculating about things baselessly. So I thought...
It's a rich tradition, though.
Yeah.
With anime media.
I thought that we would try something a little different this time around, where we'll talk about a few of the bigger stories that have popped up in the last couple of months, and try to think of every possible scenario that could play out with it in the next year or so, and maybe try to figure out some odds of how things might go on certain issues. Yeah. So let's just start with what I think is probably the biggest story that is going to get attention from most people, and that is the huge announcement that Studio Ghibli titles will be streaming quote unquote internationally.
Yeah. It's weird because they've listed, we know Netflix has it for everywhere outside of North America. We know HBO Max, or it's Max now?
It's Max.
HBO Max now. For streaming in North America, but they don't do anything up here, and they ostensibly cut a deal with Crave for their originals, so where's Ghibli in Canada?
Well, here's the thing. We don't know if they have it for North America. They have it for the States.
Yeah.
What I found interesting was when the announcement came out that Netflix had the title internationally. It was like trending on social media for about 3 days. And
it was great because everybody was all like, oh sweet, I can just have Netflix. It's like, no, you live in America. And
there are 2 or 3 different reactions you would see from people on social media about this. It's like, one, the person who's just oblivious to the fact.
They don't understand how Netflix works.
Yeah, they think that it's going to be on Netflix everywhere. The people who assumed that
international means Canada, right? You're like, no.
Well, actually, so the announcement that circulated, the typical headline was that Studio Ghibli titles will be streaming internationally on Netflix everywhere except US, Canada, and Japan.
Yeah.
So most
places did make it clear up front.
This exposed the fact that most people aren't aware of the fact that HBO Max has the rights to stream them in the United States. Yeah. So there was another common response was the assumption that these wouldn't be streaming at all in the US and Canada, because if it's not on Netflix, it doesn't exist to them, basically. And then there are, of course, the people who were aware of the fact that it was going to be on HBO Max were either disappointed that they'd have to get HBO Max to get it, or they would, or they were just glad that they were getting it, and telling people, hey guys, you are getting it, but it's on this service that you don't know about and probably don't care about. But what is for all of the massive discussion that was going on, very few seemed to hone in on the fact that
what the fuck is Canada doing?
That Canada is a black hole in this situation. So it's worth pointing out that I think last I checked, there are 4 countries in the world that don't have Netflix right now. My list, so I think this may actually be outdated. China, North Korea, Syria, and Crimea.
I think that's probably still accurate.
Yeah.
I don't see why that would change. They're also all places that if somehow you had the internet access, you just VPN.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm, kudos to the North Korean VPNing to watch, Friends on Netflix.
Apparently Crunchyroll is available in North Korea, though.
That's suspect.
So I hear. But, yeah, so that means that those 4 countries and Canada and Japan are the only countries on Earth where they will not be streaming anywhere. everyone who could potentially comment on this situation has either not said anything or they have denied that
it's theirs.
That it's theirs. So far Netflix hasn't said anything. G-Kids has not commented. I think people have tried reaching out to them and they have not commented on that. And should note, G-Kids has the streaming rights in Canada. So if anyone is going to make a decision, it's going to be them.
Right.
And we don't even know if they're trying to get them posted anywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if someone were to ask them in person, they'd just say, oh, you can buy them on VOD in Canada. It's like, no, it's not what we're asking. Yeah.
I want to.
It's a conversation I've had in my head.
I want to spend money on a service forever, to hone these instead of having digital copies that may disappear the second that service also falls over.
Yeah. CBC Gem, I reached out to them. They denied that they have it and they don't seem to be, they think it seems pretty unlikely that they're going to get it, which is unfortunate because I think that would have been the best.
I think it would have been technically the most accessible service because any Canadian can throw that on their phone or on their media devices and be good to, like, do they have a Roku app yet or no? Or are they in the middle of doing that?
They do not have a Roku app.
So it wouldn't be, it's not necessarily the most accessible by virtue of platform, but it would be largely accessible because anybody who would be like, if you've got a smart TV, you probably have an iPhone or an Android, and then you have Gem, so you're fine. Yeah.
Now, cart.ca did say that they reached out to Crave, and Crave denied that they had the Studio Ghibli films. But it is worth emphasizing that it wasn't, when Cart posted that on Twitter, it wasn't clear if they had reached out to them recently, or
there had been some prior
that they had asked them when the first announcement was made of the HBO Max announcement from last year with the Studio Ghibli streaming in the US. So, and Crave has not directly commented on whether or not they've picked up these films either.
There's no press release one way or the other.
Yeah, so I don't know. If we're looking at things right now, I think, especially because, there's going to be a lot of attention on them as a possibility because they have the rights to the HBO Max original content, which oftentimes when these deals are struck, that's the only thing everyone seems to think is important is the streaming exclusives. But
it's because
that's not what that's not what you're supposed to draw people in with. That's what you get them to stay with, though.
Well, for the purposes of Crave, they're essentially the same. Because it's about trying to get Canadians to get on Crave at all, and you're like, well, you can't get this. It's us or nobody else. So it's like, there is a place for, hey, all of your American friends and family are talking about this new HBO Max show on Twitter, and you can't.
Yeah.
So that is a selling point for Crave. That still doesn't, licensing's so weird, and then it's made weirder by the fact it's like, okay, HBO is a conglomerate. They are part of Warner Media, which is part of AT&T, which also, of course, means one of their corporate siblings, which we know they're already synergizing with for select titles, is Crunchyroll. So there's the 1,000,000,000,000 chance. It seems very unlikely, but not impossible by virtue of we know they're just being better about. Warner, for the first time in its corporate history, is actually trying to leverage each other's divisions and each other's libraries. There's the non-zero possibility, at least, that you could have Crunchyroll could end up being the one place where Crunchyroll could have it would be Canada as a fill in the gap from, well, we got a North American license and we should put it up somewhere.
I really don't think that'll happen.
Yeah, no,
but
that's some classic Zon in Canada will never happen speculation.
Yeah.
I think it would be the one reason they wouldn't even want to do it is be like, look, it's nice that you're offering, but it's going to cause so much more bullshit for us that it's worth.
Yeah. And also your average viewer is not going to think to look for it on Crunchyroll or find it on Crunchyroll like they would on Netflix or Crave. So, or CBC Gem.
Yeah.
So, I mean, let's look at what our possible outcomes here are. So, one is that we don't get these Ghibli films streaming at all.
I feel like
Carl, what do you think the odds?
I think that would be? I wouldn't, if I were running a gambling establishment, I wouldn't pay you out. I'd just take your money and say you get nothing back no matter what happens. Your odds are -1 to 1. You will give me $100 and I will keep your $100 no matter what happens because it's too plausible.
Yeah.
Or, put it this way, it'd be like, it's a 1-to-1 payout or I'll give you an extra $10. So it's like a 0.1 to 1. Something like that.
I think it's safe to pin that at 1-to-1.
Yeah.
Cause it's,
less than that.
Yeah,
like, it's like I said, it's too favorable. Like, it's like 1-to-2 would be like, you give me $100, I will give you, think back, like, I will give you a 1 to 0.1. If you give me $100, I'll give you like 110 for your trouble because I held your $100. But this is just like it fits in with too many other things, some of which we may cover later in the podcast in terms of anime distribution in Canada. That it's fucked up and we get nothing. It's like that's the default.
Yeah,
like 99 times out of 100.
All right. Well, what about the possibility that Crave does get the streaming rights to the Ghibli films, but they just show up in May without any kind of promotion, announcement, or acknowledgement?
I think that's like that would be my 1-to-1. Like, you give me 100, I'll give you I'll pay out same. Like, I'll give you 200 back. Like, sure. What's a 1-to-1?
Personally, that's what I'm expecting to happen.
I think the flip side of it though is because there's been inquiries, I would think someone would have put out something. Like, press release departments need something to do. There's somebody would be writing that up just to write it up so that it's out there. Like, that's my counterpoint on that is just like, we'll get something if it's gonna turn up. I highly doubt it will just show up. Like, that seems...
Well, worth noting that Dragon Ball Super Broly, that's what happened with that film. It showed up out of nowhere. No, it wasn't even on one of those coming to Crave next month lists. It just showed up without any notice whatsoever. And it is still there if you want to check it. It's on the high-end Crave, the Crave plus movies plus stars.
Yeah,
Crave plus movies plus HBO,
there you go. But if we get it, it's not gonna be on basic Crave. If we get it, it'll be on like super premium Crave.
It'll be on premium
and
Crave,
that will be why we get no notification, because they're not like actually smart enough to like push, hey, there's super premium Crave with extra goodies.
Well, okay, what would you say the odds are that Crave gets them and does do a like proper announcement press release?
I don't know. Same. Like, it's like, if Crave gets it, either solution is equally plausible, I think. Like, an announcement is like, either way. So it's like same probability in my heart.
Okay. I'm still leaning towards just
Nothing.
dropping without notice. It seems like to me, that seems like a very Bell Crave thing to do.
Thanks.
Especially when it comes to anime, which they just have never really dealt with at all apart from Spider Riders. And which is also available on Crave if you weren't aware. Okay, well, what about the possibility that G-Kids, who very likely still just have the streaming rights and haven't sold them to anyone, makes a side deal with Netflix and has them on Netflix Canada before the end of the year because they can't sell them to anyone else? It's worth noting that the Netflix international deal is not with G-Kids, it is with a different company that deals with the rights to Ghibli internationally.
I don't know, because that depends on Netflix giving a shit about Canada and being proactive. And it depends on G-Quid being proactive about Canada, so I'm like, I don't know, it seems like that seems like 4-to-1 against. Like, it just seems like very, I just don't feel like it's pretty, I just feel like it's not terribly likely, but it's a possible outcome. Like, it's not unreasonable. Like, just, like,
G-Kids cannot sell those rights to anyone else.
I'm just not sure if they care to, like, then do the rest of the work.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is it worth the rest of their time? Do they think it's worth the rest of their time with whatever legal and stuff they gotta fill out and cut deals? And, like, is the check big enough that it's worth doing it? And it should be, but I don't know that it is, because Canada is such an odd market for media in that way.
So I guess you wouldn't have a lot of faith that G-Kids would make a side deal and Netflix would have them by the time HBO Max does in the States.
No, I think it'd be even more unlikely. I feel like if it's gonna happen, we're gonna end up with like I think there's a strong possibility such that I wouldn't take the bet of like, we get it, but like way late. And on any service we get it on, way late. Like, not even within the year. It'll be like, hey, it's 2021. Congratulations, Canada. You finally get the Ghibli films on whatever.
What about the odds that we get them on some service before Hayao Miyazaki dies? I mean, we know he's gonna live to be like 117, but...
I don't know if he keeps just like chain smoking cigarettes while he's drawing. I'm surprised he doesn't like ash out when he's on Sasuke and he's in the middle of like fucking drawing. That's how you know he's a master craftsman. He's never just fucking like set his desk on fire with his chain smoking. I think it's plausible that we'll get it. I put it this way, I could see another possible breakpoint for Canada getting it is when his next theatrical feature is saying they'll be like, oh shit, this isn't here? Oh, we better somewhat like it will spur somebody into action because it will be a reminder, oh yeah, we should do this.
See, by that logic, somebody would have picked up the broadcast rights to Dragon Ball Super as soon as the Broly film became a big hit in theaters.
The theaters are different, I think. Dragon Ball's a little like, I don't know, like I feel like that's kind of like, it's an incentive, it's not a guarantee. And television series are a different issue than like a film library, I feel like. There's kind of different modes of who's looking to manage that section for a service and what's going to spur action on that.
Still worth emphasizing that we're still the only major English-speaking market that hasn't had that show on TV.
That is, well, look, we've got a lot of problems.
Yeah. What do you think the odds are CBC Gem does wind up getting the films?
As an eventuality, I mean, I don't know. It seems pretty long shot. Like, especially since they're saying we don't, like, it was one thing when it was like completely up in the air. It's like, well, I mean, you know, fits in with the classic Wonderful World, the Disney classic CBC kind of move. Like, here's some like prestigious kind of content. These days, man, like, yeah. Like,
that does bring back memories to the time that they ran. This does bring back memories to the time that they ran Spirited Away on CBC and like cut it for time by 30 minutes.
Yeah.
They didn't even know what they were dealing with when they picked that up.
Yeah, and towards that end, like the flip side of the CBCs is on one hand there are aspects of that as an organization that are very forward thinking, and then there's aspects of it as being incredibly calcified, and it's just hard to say where this would land in that off the top.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, on one hand, the CBC is cool enough that they're selling now retro CBC logo shirts. It's Spencer's Gifts. I saw that there the other day. I was walking through the mall. I'm like, well, that's some like properly Canadian nostalgia shit. But I'm like, that's one cool person in the company who had a thought. And that might have been somebody from some other merchandising company be like, that's a sick logo. Let's license it off of CBC. And the CBC is like, okay. And have no idea that it's now in Spencer's Gifts alongside of adult novelty items.
For that possibility you brought up before, where it turns out that HBO Max actually picked up the whole, all the North American streaming rights
and
for
it ends
Ghibli
up through,
films,
and they're just a subsidiary.
Or they're just sitting on them right now, and they wind up putting them out through a subsidiary that is available in Canada, specifically Crunchyroll. What in betting odds? What do you think the chances of that possibility are?
It's 1,000 to 1, but it's like it's from one side it's 1,000 to 1. On the other hand, it's like New Warner's is just such a different beast than it used to be. It's
never the same beast for like more than 2 days.
Well, no, that's the thing though, is it's now a much more reliably synergistic company. The fact that like, even before the deals were settled, like, the fact that like Crunchyroll and Cartoon Network, specifically the Adult Swim division, were already thinking like, yeah, this is gonna get sewn up, so we need to start doing work. The fact that the second it was sewn up, part of the announcements that were made for HBO Max is, hey, we're gonna get the top tier shit off Crunchyroll and make sure that that's also visible there as like, they've got better synergy going than like HBO, than Showtime and CBS do. And they have less excuse, I think, with those two, with the Viacom CBS tie-up, as they were corporate siblings before, so it should have been like always pretty easy to be like, hey, sweet, and get that stuff rolling again. Instead, it's like, I'm sure they're going to like drag that out because it inflates subscribers. Meanwhile, rather than keep services up that would technically then say like, as Warner as a corporate entity has this many million subscribers, and meanwhile there's like, it's because they've left these little niche services open, they've been very proactive about saying, hey, we'll roll these things up, we'll move that content over and try and aggregate stuff to really make valuable offerings. Towards that end, they can take a look at, I mean, the other thing is like Crunchyroll is the second really only to Amazon and Netflix in terms of understanding the value of global play. So if any corporate subsidiary is going to bother their corporate parents to improve their global game, Crunchyroll is like really the best shot for that. Is it still probable? It's a long shot, but yet it's not impossible. That's what's weird. It's very weird.
Yeah, well, the advantage that Crunchyroll has in that area is that they're dealing with content that hadn't already been tied down in like a bunch of different regions across the globe to begin with. So they had a bit of a clean slate in the arena of anime streaming.
Yeah.
And they use that to their advantage.
Yeah, but I mean, it means they've built a business pattern around that. So since that's already part of the corporate mindset, like, I'm not gonna roll them out being like, hey, this is just another move. It's a natural move for them. It would not be, the one thing I gotta say about this is it wouldn't be exotic for them. For other players, it'd be very strange. Like, it would be super weird for anybody else who also has a Canadian footprint to get something only for Canada. Funimation isn't gonna do it. Yeah. Like, that's 10,000 to 1. High Dive doesn't have the money. That's 100,000 to 1.
Man, that'd be funny.
That would be hilarious. It's like, the one play, watch, now that I've said that, like, you're gonna finish editing this episode, and then the next day there's gonna be a fucking press release.
High Dive has the rights to all Studio Ghibli films streaming, but only in Canada. Hey, at least they have a Roku app.
Hey, wait a second. If it's on Funimation's Roku app, then you can just watch it.
Oh yeah. There are some loopholes you can abuse in the Funimation Roku app and watch almost everything for free. You don't get to choose whether it's subtitled or dubbed, but it's, whatever. Yeah. I don't have to pay for it. So speaking of streaming companies that have a presence in Canada, that is a hot topic in a recent legislative review panel that took place. So last year, the federal government put together a legislative council called Broadcasting and Telecommunications Legislative Review Panel. It's all right there in the name. To basically review the entire broadcast system in Canada. Everything from the ground up. And a couple of weeks ago, they released the results of their report and their recommendations for Parliament. And I didn't read the whole thing because it is like 250 pages long.
It's a real policy
but
paper.
It is it is everything in the kitchen sink in there. And it is some interesting things have certainly come up in that document.
Yeah, there's some definitely I feel like part of the thing is they want to like put out the most aggressive possible scenario, knowing our oligarchy in media will fucking wind that down really hard. Yeah. So they just gotta
not to mention the foreign streaming services will push back to the point of making a lot of the stuff that they want to do impossible anyway. I think the thing is I think they're over asking intentionally. They know that's like, look, they may not even necessarily want that out of, like, sure, dream stuff, but really they just want to be in a position where it's all like, an ideal scenario would be like, hey, you have to pay sales tax now. Like, that actually would probably really, all they really want out of that is to get, like, that playing ground evened out. Cause that alone would be a huge, especially if they said, hey, we're going to take the sales tax, we're going to allot that specifically towards more tax support for CanCon or something like that, or making the CBC ad free or whatever. Those, like, if you can just do that, it's a huge leg up over the current over the current scenarios. Yeah. Well, I mean, let's focus on some of the points that are brought up. Yeah. They do recommend completely restructuring the CBC so it is a ad-free entity within 5 years, which is probably the best single proposal in that entire thing, because even people who hate the CBC think that it should be ad-free.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like, you make it like the BBC, go all in, and then in that you have, just BBC Worldwide. Longer term, once it's an ad-free entity, then its income can start to be like, hey, CBC Worldwide, you build content to license. Yeah. And make stacks on. Like,
and also there's also a proposal to change their mandate to focus on indigenous perspectives and to take creative risks, which are, it's impossible to argue against, like, those kinds of proposals.
And especially when it's all like, these are harder things to do if you're ad supported. Yeah. If you're not ad supported, if you're publicly supported through, some sort of a taxing set aside, those and through relicensing, those are a lot easier to take because one, bolder stuff is actually going to be probably easier to relicense than like, here's another like milquetoast CBC sitcom. You can't resell that. No one is going to buy that. Netflix isn't going to be like, oh, we need the international rights. They're never going to care. It's also nothing that would let you consider making CBC Gem an international forward-facing service.
Yeah.
If it's just vanilla reruns or like milk toast can con that only exists for the tax break, you gotta be willing to say like, we're gonna make prestige television, and it's gonna be easier to do if you're not like, but we need to sell ads for, fucking, Dunkaroos.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing that's interesting, and this has been the case for a few years, but it's especially been the case in the results of this panel, is there is an emphasis on producing Canadian content that is global, like world class, something that people from other countries will want to watch. They'll see this and think, I want to see more of this Canadian stuff. And we're already seeing this happening. Like a couple weeks ago, I made the mistake of mentioning Anne with an E in one of my tweets, and all these Anne with an E bots started retweeting me and begging for a 4th season of the show. I felt like I was being like, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that happen that wasn't from some alt-right group. I mean, they're using basically the same tactics to try and get through to the CBC to get a 4th season of Anne with an E. I mean, all the more power to them, but that was so weird.
But that goes to show that you can do this stuff and it works.
Yeah.
And actually, you know what? You can do it with the goofball comedy. Like, I've been seeing people really let down that Schitt's Creek is gonna hit its series finale, and I would never have called that.
I can't believe that how many people are talking about that show.
Yeah, like, so it's like, the CBC can do this. This just takes the fucking limiters off so that that's all they do.
People globally are like talking about Kim's Convenience and Coroner and those shows. Like they're already starting to pull this off, and if it's more of a central part of their mandate, we'll definitely see more of that.
Well, I mean, it's like, and I think like the CBC has been making stuff that like when we've shown friends up from the States, like stuff like Tall Boys, they're like, why is this, you know, like all you have, like it's, the flip side, yes, television is this hyper oversaturated market at this point in some ways, but that's all the more leverage in some ways a CBC Gem would have on a market, because they say like, hey, all hits, no garbage, all prestige content, reasonable price, and then it's Canada's Face the World. Super great soft power play. Lets us continue looking good because no one outside of Canada understands like how badly we treat natives, you know, things like that.
Yeah,
like it's not making international news at all. Like the blockades or any of this stuff. That's a local issue to us.
Yeah, and
we can keep it that way if we have CBC Gem as their face of the world. Well, until they watch our CBC News and they're like, they're assholes too.
Well, here's another thing is that to that extent, the proposals are in line with CBC's current strategy. Yeah. But like, right now, Catherine Tate, the CEO of CBC, she does not want the service to go ad-free, so it's definitely pushing them towards some things they don't want to do as much. I feel like, and I think they'll succeed, and I think it will be a good thing ultimately, and help CBC get past some of the ways it holds itself back.
I think, like, especially when you consider like how even public television stations in the United States sometimes punch above their belt in terms of creating content that then has redistributable value. Even in smaller markets like Seattle's KCTS, you know, co-produced Bill Nye the Science Guy with Disney. Yeah. And they also did, they did a bunch of other content that was then redistributed to other PBS stuff. And then these days would probably be streaming fodder. You can have pretty small organizations, but if their mandate is to make something that's supposed to drive viewership, and specifically, and of course, in PBS's case, is drive donations, but like the modern version of that is that you drive relicensing outside of your country or drive international viewers to your national streaming service or whatever. This is something that you can achieve, and Canada's got like plenty of scale in which to do it and plenty of creatives with which to do it. It's just got to be the job. It can't be just, it can't just be, well, we support Canadian creatives making anything as long as we'll give them a tax credit for anything. It's like, no, get picky, and then getting picky, you'll like actually get way bigger returns on investment. Not just in terms of being able to make the service self-supporting, but also in terms of Canada's image to the world. Soft power. Cool Canada initiative. Yeah. Except effective. Oh!
Yeah. But yeah, the whole reason that this whole strategy that's being proposed and pushed and gravitated towards more is, it's all of course in response to big global streaming players that have disrupted the market. And this is probably the more contentious aspect of this legislative review is regulating those services. Now, in terms of regulating internet access, there's some great stuff.
No, the stuff, there's specific internet related stuff, and we should take a quick aside before we get into the streaming thing. What they've got for that makes a lot of sense, which is, hey, if you're not going to build rural broadband, we're going to make this stuff happen because we understand that is the way forward, and it's very cost effective too. It's a very good way of getting more content to more underserved communities. You can't be saying, like there's towns in Canada where it's like, if you want high speed internet, like you're either in the little downtown core of that little place, but if you're outside of it, they want to charge you $50,000 to run the line out to your place. And then they will then wire up everybody else who is along that line. Yeah. And they make the consumer pay for it. That just shouldn't be allowed. Yeah. If that's the only way Shaw or Bell or whoever can do it, it needs to be a national initiative then. And then they can be, Shaw and Bell and whatever can be just like the way Tech Savvy or these other players are. You can be a player on the state-owned line. Yeah. I mean, the ideal way to do it, and I think you hear this a lot when it comes to dealing with the last mile. Yeah. Is how they do it in Japan, essentially, where if we did it the way they do it in Japan for internet distribution, basically the infrastructure would still be owned by like Bell and Telus and Shaw and Rogers and those companies. However, they would only be wholesalers. Yeah. And they would not be selling it direct to consumers. Yeah. They would have to sell consumers would only deal with third parties like Tech Savvy or V-Media. So that you have ultimate competition, so that you have 50 people serving your house, not one. And the thing is like Shaw and these companies don't want to be in that position, like monopoly position. The fact that like cable at all operates that way in Canada is of course dramatically different to the way it operates in the United States. And it is to the chagrin of our telecom providers that they have to deal with this at all. But we're still underserved because of this. So they're like, the CTRC basically has to step in. It becomes like rural electrification was in the United States and Canada's, in the 1930s and 1940s. It just simply has to be a top-down federal initiative because no one's gonna, it's just not enough market. Well, too bad. That's all of Canada. That's how Canada works.
So unfortunately, the recommendations don't go far enough.
Don't quite go far enough there.
But it's still a big improvement over how things are, and it probably would make differences in terms of
I am hoping
cross-country connectivity.
And I do hope that the various and sundry low Earth satellite broadband internet projects do provide some competition. But then again, that's something Canada could theoretically take a lead in. We have all of these science for that. We just, again, you get a modicum of vision, and it's sad that even noted jerk-off Elon Musk has that more so than our federal government.
Yeah. So let's get back to the regulation of the streaming services. So that is probably one of the most contentious proposals in this, and a big reason for that is because it's not really clear what they want to do. And I think a big reason for that is because the things that they have proposed are not really possible. Yeah. Notably, as far as I can tell in this document, they don't bring up anything about quotas or making services carry like 30% Canadian content.
That's impossible. Like there's no way to make quotas as we know it works.
The EU is trying. They tried something like that, and it hasn't been implemented yet, so we don't know how it's going to go.
The EU is also a market of 500 million people, not 40. The EU has a vastly different math behind it. And I mean, it's strictly speaking the largest single. The EU's, even with UK out of it, is the largest single market. And by any sort of reasonable facts in terms of how Brexit's going to go, Britain's going to be following effectively EU rules. So it's still going to, such that like England doesn't implode the United Kingdom doesn't implode as a country. For the purposes of any sort of media regulation like this, you can still probably much call it a 500 million person market. As such, yeah, they can try and ask stuff. Also, all of them each little country has fairly vibrant production stuff. And if you're going to serve those languages, serve those countries anything in like German or French or something like that, where are you importing the content you're going to get? It's a way easier to fill the quota when just to fill what you need for a service.
Also, dubbing will very likely count towards that.
Exactly.
That quota as well. And
so, like, it's very easy to, like, you could, like, for the purposes of Netflix Germany, Yeah, pretty easy to have 50% German content. 100%, like, probably closer to like 90. Because you're gonna have like American stuff and then like anything else you're gonna want to watch, it's gonna be probably be made in like, what, Germany or Austria? Like how much of it's gonna be made?
Whichever's cheaper.
Yeah, like it's gonna be made somewhere in German by German people, maybe in a foreign country, but for the purposes of any sort of, content minimums would fit. Like, it's like Canada is such a unique issue for that, because really the only other market that's smaller that has the same problems is Australia, and then it's like, it's never quite tried to necessarily put, like, it's not tried to push like OzCon in the same way, and it may just because it's that much smaller that it, like, that's completely out of the idea.
The big difference is that they're not attached to the United States.
Yeah.
So,
no, 95% of the populace isn't within the border of a country that's nearly an order of magnitude larger.
Yeah. And New Zealand, however, is more of a situation comparable to Canada.
Yeah.
But where that's another topic there.
Separate episode.
Yeah, separate episode. So yeah, their proposals for doing something in place of a quota, it has to do with like trying to get information on algorithms and figuring out how to make Canadian content quote unquote discoverable or visible. Again, not really clear how they would implement something like that. And it depends on those companies providing their information. If you've ever watched the, there was one legislative review at the CRTC where a representative from Netflix was talking to then, CRTC commissioner, lead commissioner, Blaze. And he kept asking them over and over and over and over again why you're not providing your user data as you requested. And they just kept giving the same PR response over and over again, and Blaze just got fed up and stormed out. He was so angry. I'm pretty sure the clip of that is on YouTube. I encourage you to check it out. It is an amazing moment. But yeah, getting that kind of information requires the cooperation of those companies, which is not going to happen. Also, I mean, there are privacy concerns as well, and this is something that
I think it doesn't necessarily need to be all the way to like that, but I think the easiest thing that you could mandate, and they'd have very little and simply say, we're doing this or we're blocking your service or some shit like that, which would be, of course, incredibly controversial, but it would be, you need to twist their arm. Or you like, either say like, you do this or we will Netflix tax you specifically or something like that. Is you need to say like, hey, when the Canadian when this service opens up in Canada, when you hit their landing page, you're starting with a bar of CanCon. You're highlighting the Canadian properties first, regardless of your algorithm. And that would be very simple for any of these services to do. All of these things can, like this, like from a computer science standpoint, from an implementation standpoint, it's the lightest work thing you could ask them to do. Yeah. It'd be one dev effing around. So there's no excuse for them not to simply say, I'm visiting from the blank region, I'm highlighting content from that region first, then X. Or, okay, whatever we suggest for the viewer, like viewer faves, or things your bookmarks, and then second line is Canada. But same, I mean, like, even when I take a look at like how the Fire Stick works in terms of what it lands on, there's no reason that when Amazon is listing off stuff, that here's stuff that we have, just list off stuff that's Canadian.
But I think that's I think that's a misconception. I don't think the idea is to create if you are going to try to do this route effectively, the best way to do it is not to make a separate bar for Canadian content, but to make sure that Canada is represented in all the other categories that people would normally gravitate to. That's why you would need.
I don't think you necessarily, it's still
access to like the algorithms.
You don't necessarily need it from their side, but you need to tell them that like we're going to analyze it from our side, and if we find it unsubstantive, you don't need this stuff up front. Asking for it up front gives them cover to the point where I wonder if that's the point. That if you ask for it up front, you give them the excuse to blow you off, and you're like, good, we didn't really want to have to fucking deal with this anyways. Whereas what you say is like, look, we're going to monitor this. We're going to see what you are and aren't highlighting, knowing that you can change the balance some way. And if we're not seeing, for people accessing it from Canada, sufficient highlighting of this in each category, knowing in fact that we are producing things in these categories, as they're, like if we see new content go up on your service from Canada and we don't see it highlighted in the relevant genres, then you build into that pressure. That's the angle.
Yeah. This is
boil the frog.
Yeah. This whole approach is raising a lot of concerns from people like Michael Geist, who's the prolific copyright lawyer who appears on the news a lot. He is very much against this. I think he's overreacting a little bit, and a few other groups as well. I mean, I can understand the concerns, but I don't think that this is a realistic Big Brother kind of situation that people think. Even when it comes to the news content, that's another aspect of it. How they want to try and regulate social media networks and how
I feel
and how reliable news sources pop up, which, to be honest, Canada's not going to succeed in doing it itself. I think we're going to start seeing more countries holding like Facebook and Twitter accountable for content that gets posted on there.
It's going to be much more an EU thing again. You need a market. You need a market that actually gives a damn about its civics and citizens. That's larger than 40 million people. You need a 500 million person market that basically says that could unquestionably say, like, if you fuck this up, we will build a competitor to this. We will make it also very clear to our populace why they shouldn't screw with you because you're bad people. And like they're in a much bigger, they've got a way bigger lever to like pull down on.
Well, I mean, we'll see about that, but.
Well, no, I mean, as it stands, like just GPRD, just the regulations regarding cookies and all this stuff has been like tech, you said jump and tech had to say how high, and anytime they've been caught not doing that, they have been slamming these people with that.
Yeah.
They're very aggressive about that. It's much more like the US used to be in the 90s back when they would stomp on Microsoft for being shits.
Yeah.
And actually much more important that they do so because the operating system isn't nearly as important as it turns out as what's coming through it. Yeah, 1 billion people use Windows, 2 billion people use Facebook. It's been a while since we've had a big rollover between social network services, but I mean, even as it stands generationally, Zoomers don't fuck with Facebook. That's where their parents are. That's where their grandparents are. They're not going to hang out there. They'll move, they'll gravitate to something else, which is by virtue of being smaller, isn't yet considering these things and has different modes of communication and may have different, pitfalls. From, medium as a message standpoint, like the underlying medium is changing so rapidly now that you'll sort out Facebook and maybe keep boomers from going like full Nazi, and meanwhile something else will be like it's just
we can have some faith in Zoomers for now at least, or that at least they're incubating some kind of resistance to all this. But everyone post Zoomer is going to be around for a while. So,
and we know plenty of millennials who are assholes as millennials ourselves. So
exactly, millennials I think will wind up being almost, if not just as bad as boomers.
I don't know. It's going to be 50. It's going to be one of those really 50-50 things because there's going to we're going to have just straight up like tankies and then just like Nazis. That's all that's all it's going to be. You're going to be one or the other. I'm sorry. That's like as a generation we have some degree of internet skepticism, but it is not necessarily the norm unless you grew up in a place where you had that way early, such that you essentially culturally are probably closer in a sense to a Zoomer in as much as you grew up not trusting the internet. And I don't feel like that's there for every millennial.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, we got off track.
Yeah, way off track.
Anyway, the reason I brought this up, obviously, with this cultural policy regulation of streaming services, like as we mentioned before, the real thing they want is to charge GST onto these services and get them to pay into the Canadian Media Fund. Yeah, which that is perfectly reasonable. It's not going to be easy to get them to do that, but it is achievable. Personally, I hope it happens.
And that may be the other reason they're asking so big is that like we will either ask for the most absurd thing, or you can pay a bit of taxes. Like, it's like a shakedown. But it's the legitimate one. But like, it's a shakedown approach, knowing that like, look, we are a country of 40 million people. These are services with 500 million people. They can easily be like, F it.
Yeah.
So you gotta sort of, it's so tough. We don't have leverage. So you just gotta you gotta punch it from whatever angle you can take and then hope that at the very least you can take a cut of what's coming into that.
You have to pick your battles, for sure. And it's very obvious that the whole point of this is the targets are Netflix, they're Amazon, they're Disney.
Yeah.
I don't think they really care about anyone else, but they don't, as far as we can tell, these proposals, and I gotta emphasize again, these are not actual.
They haven't even
these are not actual rules that are being proposed or rules that are being considered.
These haven't been considered as laws. These are general policy proposals that then in practice in Canada would then go to committees that would try and say, here's a proposal. What does this mean in practice? At which point that's probably where you're going to consider like, hey, there are niche services that will never have anything probably to do with Canada.
Well, that brings us to the point. Is this going to affect the services we care about, like Crunchyroll, High Dive, Funimation, these services? Now that
you want the odds on that?
We're
1,000 to 1.
Let's
it
do the
ain't
odds.
gonna happen.
Anime streaming. Okay, here's the first possibility. Go through each possibility.
Right.
Anime streaming services are just explicitly exempt from regulation.
That's 10,001. I don't see them explicitly carving out something just for anime. If they carve it out, it will be for specialty services. In other words, if you're carrying something genre specific,
it's for specialty services.
Specialty services I could actually see very likely. So enough so that I wouldn't want to be the guy trying to cover a bet on that because I'm probably going to lose. I can see them cutting it out because even if they don't specifically consider it for anime, there's too many other specialties. Like this does just reality. Again, it would be easier for other genres versus mediums. And I know Netflix wants to mess with that definition. Leave that for other podcasts. But more seriously, it just seems like, are you gonna try and, let's take another sort of smaller player that does do some direct stuff, Shout Factory. I don't see them stomping on Shout Factory. And honestly, smaller services like that, genre content tends to not, like we get lots of English language genre CanCon because we're a cheap place to shoot, and these are not high budget mediums. You're not caking when you're making a horror film or some indie drama or whatever. So that's like, I feel like they're gonna, if only on accident they'll cut out a hole which would immediately be sheltering anime services. Cause you're just gonna say, like another thing, like even if it's not by medium, they may say like, unless you are of gross number of, percentage of population, Canadian revenues, something. They'll cut out a hole.
Of course, we don't know what any of those numbers are for any of these services. We can only speculate.
We can only guess.
Crunchyroll is still, it's still at $6.99 a month in Canada. It is $6.99 US. I don't understand why they haven't brought the prices up.
Well,
and yet still have that stupid restriction where after 13 weeks you can't access something that's in the archive or in the
without a subscription.
Yeah, without a subscription, which is ridiculous. But also, other possibility is that the whatever regulations we get by the end of the year or whatever don't create any kind of distinction in streaming services for specialty services or anything like that. But anime services still just fall through the cracks because they don't even know they exist.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it this way. I would put that as maybe, I guess that would be equally as likely. And again, it's not a bet I would want to take because it just seems like, hey, Canada forgetting that this medium exists, we kind of already got that. Our various insider distributors and retailers don't always remember anime exists, so why should regulation?
Fair enough. What do you think? And we could probably already get a preview of this with what certain provinces are doing with their provincial sales tax on streaming services.
I think that's
but anime streaming services have to charge GST and pay into the Canadian Media Fund. What do you think the chances of that are?
GST, yes, Canadian Media Fund would be something I think they would rightfully push back on because the only one that would ever conceivably the only one that could ever conceivably get something back off of that would be Crunchyroll on the basis of either original co-production, as they are gradually playing with that. So why not, if you're going to do some of this stuff, why not try and you already have talent in Canada that's used to doing overseas co-productions with Japan. So it's like, I could see them not pushing back on the basis of, don't worry, we're gonna rinse ahead on this.
Well, the premise here I'm suggesting is that they're not actually carrying any Canadian content, but still have to contribute to the fund because they're part of the ecosystem.
I don't think any specialty service, and that would go for everybody, if they're not carrying Canadian content, they're not going to want it at all. They're going to push back on. The sales tax, they know that they can't push back on because if they do, they're going to turn around and probably be slapped with some sort of I guess you've got to have a show where somebody's talking after.
Well, well, there's that possibility, but also the other possibility, what if they are required to carry Canadian content, but address this by carrying Canadian dubs on their service.
I would think that would be, well, that's what I'm saying is like, that would be the other side of where Crunchyroll would be able to get at this and Funimation and realistically High Dive wouldn't. Crunchyroll.
High Dive would be the one I'd be worried about in that case.
Well, no, but Crunchyroll would be like, fine, we'll just produce our dubs in Canada. Like, whatever. And we'll ring you for every fucking tax credit we can in the process. To punish you for for making us do this. Yeah, I could see it from that angle. I could also, like, a worst case would be is they just do cheater deals with like, Cookie Jar to have like some just for like anime styles. What weird that like every streaming service now has My Life Me. Every anime streaming service. That would be now that's a 10,000 to 1, but it would be the most hilarious response. It's like, well, we've got CanCon now. We're highlighting it.
Yeah. And it would be even better if, they carry it in every country. And we could spread the good word of My Life Me to everyone. That is what this legislation will ultimately accomplish. That would
be the hell world punishment option for the CTRC is like, hey, you know what Canada's soft power face to the world is? Fucking Birch and Miyazaki.
Alright, well, final possibility for this scenario. Anime streaming services like Crunchyroll and Funimation or High Dive have to carry Canadian content and make contributions to the system, and as a result, they leave the country entirely.
I can't see Sony or Warner letting that slide. I would see them, I think they would go to their corporate parents and be like, they're being mean to us, and we get legal. High Dive might have to like, let it ride, but I also don't think High Dive is so niche, I just don't see them get like, what are you gonna do? Like, you're gonna beat up some tiny little company out of Houston? This is your move. This is what you're gonna focus on. This is what you're gonna get dunked on Twitter for. No, like, I don't see them leaving because it's just like, also by virtue of the fact that it's an international thing, it's like, that's the kind of shit that would then be on other countries' news. If you said in Canada, anime distributors have had to leave due to new Canadian regulations, that's on NHK World every 15 minutes for a couple of days, maybe weeks, maybe for as long as it finishes. And yeah, you think like, well, not everybody watches. It's like the whole idea behind all the CTRC stuff is improving Canada's face and soft power to the world. Nothing would as easily fuck up that bag as doing something that restricted international content from non-American creatives. America, hey, yeah, like, especially right now, no one's gonna flinch if you say fuck America regarding, content. Especially, I mean, even if you're into media and stuff, perhaps especially if you're into media stuff, you're like, fuck all this like aggregation and monopolization. Cool. That's not what anime is.
Yeah.
Really, all you'd be doing is saying like, hey, all these Canadians that were in a position of supporting streaming services that were then sending royalties back to Japanese publishers that, again, weren't necessarily always paying their animators, but they're gonna pay them even less if that money ain't coming in. It's just like the whole story is the more you pick it apart, the worse it would look. So I don't see them doing that. Cause if assuming they remembered to take that initiative, if they follow through on it at all, it's a disaster.
Yeah, it just shows, again, just going back to the fact that a lot of these proposals just don't take actual realistic optics into account whatsoever. Well, and I think that's a big reason of why we're not, like, even the proposals that will go through are probably going to be softened significantly. To the point where it's just going to result in them getting those few things that they really want done.
Really, all they want are, like, they don't even really give a shit about, like, GST for, like, the smaller services. They want GST and Canadian, Creative Fund, contributions from the major services that are effectively actually taking, like, anime viewers were never watching CTV anyways, but regular folks were. And that's where the balance is like, okay, our domestic networks are being watched less by our general population in favor of these other things. Therefore, we should tax them the way we tax the networks and have them input into funds the way we had those networks input.
Those two things are those are the big news items. There's a couple, smaller things I wanted to bring up.
Don't worry, all that speculation will be wrong. You just wasted 40 minutes of your time.
So, late last year, Viz made a surprising announcement that they are putting their content for the first time directly on Crunchyroll. So if you live in Canada, or if you watch anime legally and live in Canada, you know that Viz has been a thorn in our side for streaming for many years because they have worked almost exclusively with Hulu with only a couple of exceptions, usually Tubi TV. And they've been rather notorious for always, no matter what they do, they always refuse to work with Crunchyroll. Might just be a San Francisco thing.
Yeah.
But they really resisted it, and they finally put some titles on their service for the first time. And this is no doubt connected to the fact that Viz is going to act as the home video distributor for Crunchyroll now. And that is because they are owned by Warner because Crunchyroll is owned by Warner and AT&T, and Warner already had a distribution deal in place with Viz. So funny how that worked out in the end.
Again, Warner actually has their synergy game on lock now.
And if you are wondering...
I would say there's one other aspect though to it too, which is now that Hulu is eventually going to be a Disney service, I think that makes it and still no ETA on internationalization, probably even less so because the international push for Disney is going to be Disney Plus. I think Viz is taking a look at that being like, this is never going to scale for us.
I wouldn't, maybe, we'll see.
I think there's a bit of that.
The thing is that we don't really know how Hulu is going to change. And just on the note of Viz doing the home video distribution, if you're wondering why titles like A Place Further from the Universe or Mob Psycho 100 Season 2, why that stuff is all not getting released on home video, I'm pretty sure it's all held up in that deal right now, and we're going to see that stuff eventually come out of Viz.
It's just going to be like, they wanted to make sure that they had a reasonable pipeline of stuff to feed them.
That's what I'm expecting, but we'll see what happens. Viz can take a long time with these things sometimes.
Viz is not engineered the same way that High Dive and Funny are to hammer that stuff out. I mean, honestly, even Discotech as a distributed international weird entity has probably a more proactive home video pipeline at this point.
Yeah. But the thing is that with Hulu, we still don't really know what's going to happen with that service beyond the fact that it's probably going to fundamentally change when their contracts with NBC and CBS run out, which I think is either next year or the year after.
It's got to be pretty soon because NBC's already got their service, Peacock, in planning.
Whenever Peacock launches, that's probably when they're pulling out.
When Peacock launches, that's going to be enough of a thing that, certainly once, honestly, I'm surprised CBS hasn't tried to buy it out or finish it sooner just to drive more energy into All Access because, it can't just be Star Trek.
So we don't know what it's going to look like, but currently the entire bread and butter, the fundamental driving force of Hulu as a service in the United States is that they have those next day streams of U.S. network television.
Right.
And once NBC and CBS are out, that's over. They only have ABC, and it's going to be restructured into something different. I wouldn't be surprised if they even drop ads. And when we'll see. I think that's totally up in the air right now.
The thing that's weird to me right now is they're doing these bundles, and they're basically bundling two very similar services together plus ESPN. And I'm just like, at some point you're like, if ABC if it's just exists for ABC, and even if you said we'll put FX stuff on there too, it's like, I still don't just say unless you really think the Disney brand can't have that stuff anywhere adjacent to it, so you're trying to use it as this is your premium. I just don't see the upside in just not rolling that stuff under, if only, again, to make sure that you're getting cross-pollination, the viewers, keeping people engaged. Not everybody's going to be wanting to watch Marvel and Star Wars and Pixar shit on Disney all the time, and it's if the second they have to leave to look at something else, they're not necessarily going to pick Hulu. They're going to look at Amazon or they're going to look at Netflix. So there's so much market pressure on Disney to just simply wrap that up, I think, and simply say, hey, everybody with a Hulu Plus subscription, it's going to become a Disney subscription. If you already did the subscription, we're going to merge the stuff together.
I think they very much want to keep them separate. It's a whole Touchstone Hollywood Pictures kind of thing.
I guess.
Because Disney Plus is strictly up to PG-13. Everything else goes to Hulu. That's their strategy. I wouldn't be surprised.
It's such a weird strategy, and I still see them trying to integrate somehow. Some way they're going to try and make this so that you're not context switching at the very least.
Well, they're already bundling it in the US.
Yeah, no, but by bundling, it's like at some point here at some point there's going to be a unified app at least. Even if it's 2 separate subscriptions, you don't want them leaving. Cause like I understand like from a user experience standpoint, the second you leave, you don't leave to go to a specific other thing. You leave and then you're on the screen with everything. Yeah. And that just seems...
Even with Disney, there's only so much they can do about that. But the point is, Hulu was going to fundamentally change in some way. Yep. That's probably going to mark the point where it expands to Canada and other regions. When that thing that's keeping it US exclusive right now finally just fizzles out.
Yeah.
And the question is, when that fundamental change happens, is that same incentive for Viz to stick with them right now, which is, again, the fact that they get the highest ad revenue for Hulu. Their Japanese parent company, I think, prefers to have things that way. Yeah. It's never really been clear. But that ad revenue they get from Hulu is very substantial, and that's a big reason why they keep certain titles exclusive to it. Now, this Crunchyroll announcement, it got me excited at first, but it was ultimately a little disappointing because all of the content that Viz has on Crunchyroll right now is the same content that they have had on Netflix over the last few years. Like for instance, they have Inuyasha.
Yeah.
Whereas Hulu has all of Inuyasha, Crunchyroll and Netflix have only the first 2 seasons of Inuyasha. It almost seems like Viz has designated part of their library as something that they're willing to put on multiple different services.
Yeah.
But there's a certain part of their library that they have marked off as being only for Hulu and nobody else, and they still have not budged on that. And it seems that this decision to start working with Crunchyroll hasn't changed that at all.
It may be something that they don't rush towards.
Yeah. So you got like the rest of Inuyasha, you got Rama 1/2, you got a few other titles that just they refuse to put on anything else.
Yeah.
And it's really frustrating, especially given that many of those are Canadian dubbed titles as well.
Yeah.
Which is just kind of rubs more salt in the wound.
I mean, I suppose that would be like what happens if CanCon becomes a mandatory thing for stuff? Maybe that's when Viz can make a killing. just ringing, Crunchyroll and Funimation and, High Dive for syndication rights. So they'll all have the same stuff. They'll all just have dubbed Viz content to make up the gap.
Alright. So, I got just a couple possible outcomes here. So, what do you think, if you're placing bets or holding bets, the chances are that over the next year or so, this Viz content that's already sectioned off into Hulu simply remains unavailable in Canada and nothing changes, as has been the case for the last 6 or 7 years?
I mean, whenever you're on the default, you just, bureaucracy in motion tends to stay in motion. And unless something interrupts that specific deal, maybe they just let it ride. So unless something I think if nothing else changes about Hulu, besides the NBC and CBS content leaving, there's a possibility that, and then by which I mean also then they stay in as a U.S. exclusive service and so on. It's too possible. I wouldn't want to take a bet on it. I'd lose money on it because it's the most likely outcome. I can't win on that one.
Cause there's so many factors because we don't know how Hulu is.
Well, no. Now, as those other things start to come in, like now, if Hulu pulls the lucrative ad money out of that, and it's only subscriber money, and it's not necessarily somehow more lucrative for them, and so it starts to change the economics of it, where they're like, well, when we want Crunchyroll's ad money too, we want other services, we want other, deals. I could see that expanding, to other, not necessarily Crunchyroll per se. Maybe Netflix will cut them a better check or something up front, and maybe that'll be more interesting. It really depends on how Crunchyroll, we know with the stuff they license directly is essentially taking chunks out of your subscriber money and sending that back home to Japan. Now, how it works with this sub-license stuff, I don't know if it's the same or different. If it's the same, they might be like, well, hey, that's reliable and ongoing income, so we'll do that, and we'll take our chunks of that, and we'll take the ad dollars from the US, even if they're not as strong, because Crunchyroll obviously just isn't in a position to charge as much as Hulu, for those, streaming ad spots. I'd say that's 5 to 1, it's not unlikely, but it's not, super likely either, but it's,
What do you think the odds are that the Viz content does move to Crunchyroll?
Like this fully straight up?
Yeah.
10-1. Like, it's not unreasonable, but like, it's, like, if things change, Crunchyroll, the fact that they added Crunchyroll to that stuff that they've been also putting out on Viz, or also been putting out on Netflix and Tubi, is very interesting because like that really shows them hedging some bets. It's like, hey, this is an opportunity to monetize this and get royalties from yet another set. And they may literally, I mean, part of the reason they may have done it is they may literally be sitting here with like, here's what we're making from Netflix streaming, here's what we're making from Crunchyroll streaming per stream, and here's what we're making from Tubi streaming per stream, and how many streams are we doing, so what's the net revenue or gross revenue of these services for us. And they may simply take a look at, of these things that we're dealing with, where's the biggest bag, or are we best off treating, you're right, this is owned by a Japanese company. We know that Japanese companies show no loyalty in where they stream in Japan. Everything goes everywhere. And they may be taking a look at, hey, maybe we can be the first to make this move in the US and Canada. And that would be very interesting because they may just say like, screw exclusivity. We're looking for long-term money, and we get the most long-term money if people don't have to chase our content if we come to their home.
The thing is that hasn't happened yet, and it could happen now.
Well, no, it hasn't happened yet, but the thing is they're beta testing. That's why they're not putting out the whole seasons, because it's way easier to say like, here is legacy content. Here's content that we know people have probably already watched.
But there's still this firm line between the stuff that's on Hulu and everything else.
No, I think that firm line is right now them testing the market.
Okay, well,
I think it's them trying to say like, what's our better move?
Okay, well on the flip side, what would you say the chances are that Hulu within the next like year and a half or something does launch in Canada and brings all the anime, including the Viz titles with it?
It's very unlikely. I don't think Hulu, I think part of launching Hulu, in Canada would be trying to launch it fully, which wouldn't even just be the anime. Hulu has live TV offerings in the United States, and I think
all that stuff's gonna disappear.
You think that's gonna go away?
Yeah. Or it's gonna it might merge with FX or something.
Well, no. They have basically a mock cable offering. I would see them, if they're launching if they start to want to launch that internationally, I can see that being part of their plans and then being even a blocker if they can't, act on it. And I think they'd be hard to act on in Canada because we've had nobody really offering over the top. Yeah. The closest we get to IPTV type solutions is gray market stuff, which is just, that doesn't count. The way V Media happens to offer its television is effectively an IPTV solution. Yeah. As opposed to a traditional cable
there's
solution.
Also Bell Fibe and Shaw is starting to lean towards.
But I mean, those are integrated things. Like you have the same thing with Xfinity and Frontier in the States.
Right.
All these things have apps. I'm talking about third party over the top, linear access. America's rife with options for that. So much so that some of them are shutting down our IP PlayStation television. But nobody's touched that here yet. And I think that there's going to be certain things when you have services that aren't as explicitly delineating those, when those things are tiers in a service as opposed to separate services, i.e. the difference between YouTube originals and those things versus YouTube TV is these very separated services. Whereas Hulu, these are all in the same app. I can see them wanting to wait on international until they can do that. And therefore we get no Hulu. So that's why I think Hulu's so unlikely for us, is because to launch it, they're going to want to launch all of it.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get it, but it's not gonna, they're gonna wait until it's been stripped down significantly. And it's not gonna have everything.
And I think if they start stripping it down significantly, like if it starts to be like, it can't become too much of a skeleton service. It can't just be the R-rated only service, because then like, at that point, for all the effort you can, of launching it internationally, at what point do you just start working with local partners? Because it's such a narrow chunk of the market. That's why I don't see them leaving it standing up on its own. It's not a ton of revenue.
Disney definitely wants to launch it internationally, but it's really like a big mess of a service they've inherited that they're not going to be even Disney is not going to be able to do as much of it as much as they want to do with it until they make significant changes to it.
Well, and in making those,
that is going to compromise it.
Yeah, exactly. In making significant changes to it, if Hulu goes from being this was TV everywhere for everyone with next day streaming to this just has like R-rated TV shows and content that we can't stuff on Disney Plus, which really was what we want to lean into. At what point do you just sort of say like, this is a weird mess of stuff. It's lucrative, but it's never going to be wide market. Like, at what point do you almost consider saying like, this is weird prestige shit. We don't care. It doesn't make us billions of dollars. At what point do you spin that off? You know, let alone saying at least for international plays.
That's what it comes down to. What is going to be more valuable to them in the end? Yeah. The specific advantages that Hulu has by running in a US only service with all these neat bells and whistles and television alternative options. Yeah. Or being able to leverage it internationally.
Yeah. And I think internationally, the other thing is like at its heart, because we still see this kind of behavior with many of its competitors, especially with, again, more mature content. It's just so easy, and you have all the people and all the connections, and you have willing participants in licensing it. Just saying like, that's why HBO is a more mature-oriented service, you know, licensing, you know, bankrolling new Sesame Street and all that stuff aside, grabbing stuff off that was originally going to be meant for TBS to try and like pad out its young adult line. It's still not Disney. It's still not as wide audience. And towards that end, what does that then necessitate in its behavior? It's so much easier for Warner to simply say, license that shit to Crave. It's quick money, and Crave's perfectly willing to do it. So at what point does Disney say like, got all this FX stuff, it's weird, and and at what point do you just say like, go, have it locals, it's a fraction of the market, we don't care. It's not putting merch in Miniso, and you can't say that about Marvel, cause it is. So, is there any upside in it versus the quick money stuff, which is so ingrained in U.S. media production?
Well, number one complaint you hear about Disney Plus is that it doesn't really have anything that appeals to adults.
Yeah. So, and at what point do they say like, you know what, we have to redress? At what point does Disney say, and that's the other thing is like, if they're going to keep it and they keep getting that as a complaint, and it's too hard to really internationalize Hulu, at what point do they just simply say, okay, screw it, and just roll it up?
I don't think they're gonna, that's not Disney's play style. It goes against the way they've done things for decades. I don't see it happening. I think they are. I think we're gonna see Hulu stripped down, and I think they're gonna go all in and leverage it internationally. Anyway, we gotta wrap up soon, so let's just jump to the last, item I wanted to discuss, which is one of our favorite topics, Adult Swim Canada.
Oh no.
So if you're not aware, it's still going, and it's still going pretty strong. Mm-hmm. They seem to be still putting money into it. It feels like a channel that is being run by human beings. They're making their own cards, and they make lots of cards. And the cards are okay.
And it's easy content to make, so they never had any excuse.
See, the cards are not always great, but they've performed the function that they're supposed to, which is to make the channel seem like it's being run by human beings. Even in the States, the cards aren't always great. They're just kind of there.
It's there for the purposes of a parasocial relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're achieving that, which is the point.
Yeah. So, still as good and as active as it was when it launched a little over a year ago.
Our worst fears about the channel
or less than a year ago, sorry.
Yeah, our worst fears about the channel just becoming a dumping ground for like Crash Canyon.
Hey, still might happen. We'll see.
So far though.
But it hasn't happened yet.
So far, it's been, they haven't like dramatically, you look at the schedules then and now.
Yeah.
And they have not ruined them.
Yeah, we're not getting Truth Point. I think that's maybe the big thing as far as original content goes.
But I love Embattled Influencer Drill.
It's great. Great stuff. You can see it all on YouTube. And I highly recommend it. It is a beautiful parody of like,
Alex Jones.
Of Alex Jones.
It's like, it's the 100% like that. And I like how they just keep getting weirder and weirder with some, like, they're sneaking like some wild suspect DeviantArt ass shit in there. It's so bad.
Yeah. But for the most part, Adult Swim Canada is performing its function, but there's still the one key piece that's missing is any anime. any Toonami or anything.
Yeah. Despite the fact that they have things that they own lock, stock, and barrel that theoretically could be offered.
It's not 100% clear if they, completely own Fooly Cooly sequels or the upcoming co-productions, but they probably do. It's hard to get a definitive answer. Jason DeMarco did finally comment on this on Twitter. This was actually a couple months ago now. And he said that he doesn't know, what's going on. Because to be fair, it's not his wheelhouse.
It's not his wheelhouse.
But also, if there was something, the key thing, if there was something actively going on, he would know about it right now.
Yeah.
So, we probably know that there's nothing happening right now.
There's no Toonami on deck, because otherwise he'd be like, he wouldn't say like, I don't know, he would probably have to say, I can't comment.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's canary language, but okay, fine. We would see that, and we see no evidence of that.
But, he did point out that if you want to see those co-pros like the Uzumaki, the Blade Runner show that's coming up, and like the 6 other ones that they're producing.
Why does Toonami have to go to 3.5 hours? I don't know, because they're blowing money fast on co-pros.
Yeah. So, he said if you want to see those things, tell Adult Swim Canada. I mean, technically he's been saying something to that effect for years is in regards to getting anime on Canadian TV, but
yell at
that's
your
what
local
he said.
providers.
Yell at the local providers.
Well, to be fair, it literally worked for them. It's like, hey, we did Toonami as a joke. And then it was like, no, do it for real. Like, they worked. So, I mean, why not?
Yeah. So there's still a big question mark over this stuff. And of course, that's not the only barrier to Adult Swim content in Canada. You had some frustrations with getting that Fooly Cooly progressive alternative Blu-ray set.
Yeah, so that was fun because I think, it's, you think, hey, Amazon will get things in, you can pre-order things, and, no, it did not turn up on their website even after release date, and they went the day after it dropped to Sunrise Records up in Hillside Mall here in Victoria, and, they didn't have it out yet on the shelves, but, I went up to the front desk, like, hey, you got the Blu-ray? And it was just right there behind the desk. They were making up a card for it. Walked out with it. The annoying part being that, it was just about, I probably could have pre-ordered it from the States for about the same price off their Amazon.
You would have been waiting.
I would have been waiting, for it. I think the other thing, but the annoyance is like, there's clear, like, it's this ongoing issue with Amazon Canada as a service for anything, like there's a trillion different kinds of like off-brand wireless earbuds, and you want to pre-order an anime and you can't, or you pre-order something that they do have in and then they cancel your pre-order, which happened with me with Persona 5's limited edition recently. Thankfully Best Buy has stepped up, but then they quickly ran out. So a lot of people...
And this shit has been happening for like 20 years on Amazon.ca. They haven't fixed a goddamn thing.
Yeah, this gets back to, we are a market of 40 million people, and remember, we had offices with Amazon developers in Vancouver before we had Amazon Prime Video here. So people working on Amazon services could not, in fact, enjoy all of Amazon's services for a good 2 years.
And the funny thing about the not fulfilling pre-orders thing is that when I don't know if this still is the case, but when you send them an email complaining about it, I think they're still using the same form letter that they used 20 years ago, where it's just like, this has been a surprisingly popular item, and we're doing everything we can to get it in stock. I'm sure many people listening have gotten that letter before, and they've not changed their distribution methods for that kind of thing at all. Well, it's very infuriating, and it definitely does. This happened with Rick and Morty. When Rick and Morty season 2 came out on Blu-ray, they had a posting for it. It took them like 4 or 5 months before they got any stock on it. And that falls on Warner partially because they're really bad with distributing Adult Swim content in Canada.
You know what, some of this, for all I know, is maybe Atlas just being like, oh, Canada ordered something. I don't know. But here's the thing. It's like, one, it defeats the purposes of pre-orders for a limited edition if you can't reliably do it. The whole point is that you're taking a mark of demand so that you can run enough of these or run the right amount so that you're not making a bunch of box sets that sit in the store. That was the whole point of these things, is that companies could learn their lesson and not make junk that sits in the store that nobody wants. So logistics are everything. Amazon's whole value offering as a company in retail is their logistical value. That's why they're able to do what they're able to do is they have all the data and all the information and are theoretically organized to act on it such that they can get you a deal that no one else can touch as fast as possible. And they've failed on that significantly. And yeah.
I mean, I'd rather give my money to a company like Sunrise Records anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they did get it in.
Yeah. No, like that would have been heartbreaking to be like, cause then I would have been like, well, here's the flip side is if Sunrise hadn't got it in, I'd be like, Amazon has their shit together as well as a small UK based
Canada based that now
owns the UK thing.
UK HMV.
Yeah. It'd be one thing if Sunrise screwed up because it'd be like, I would accept that. But the fact that the smaller, David should never be technically Goliath, but here.
Yeah. Amazon.ca does now have a listing for progressive and alternative, but it's a reseller listing where you can buy
Right Stuff.
where you can buy the Blu-ray through Right Stuff for $92, including the shipping cost, which is basically highway robbery. Especially because a lot of people in Canada need, like, Amazon's the only option for them.
Yeah, like, we're very lucky. Like, I was honestly shocked that, one, there's a Sunrise here in Victoria, and two, they had it.
The whole thing is on Crunchyroll subtitled, but if you want to watch the dub, there actually aren't that many options.
Yeah,
the dub for Progressive has been pulled from the Google Play Store.
Which is great, because
I don't understand at all.
Well, and the fun part is when you go to redeem the digital codes that come with the Blu-ray for Progressive and Alternative, guess where they direct you to? The Google Play Store, where they're like, the fuck is this? We don't know what this is, and it won't work. Yeah. So it comes with useless digital codes on top of it all.
Yeah. And I didn't check the iTunes store. They might still be on iTunes, but again, options are at best bare bones. And then it goes back to that question of whether or not Chorus has the rights to this stuff, and if they're just sitting on it and not broadcasting this content, or if they're waiting to launch a Toonami. I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems very likely that there's probably something they could be doing that they're not doing.
Well, and it's just annoying because I'm also at the point where I'm like,
I mean, that means they play an important role in this,
yes,
too.
Yeah.
So,
well, the flip side of it is like, if Chorus can't get their shit together, and knowing that Crunchyroll is otherwise commissioning dubs and synergizing with their corporate parents, they have this, like I said, they have the subtitle versions with Fully Cooley. At what point do you just say, like, fuck it, and throw the dubs up there, too? There's no reason, realistically, unless they're trying to save it for... Why isn't it here? What is the reason? Because it's not somewhere else, so why don't you put it there?
Yeah.
Come on.
This is a mess, and I think things have been... people in key positions have overlooked important issues for Canada.
40 million people. 40 million people. There's a whole California they forgot about.
Well, the thing is that they are the Canadian distributors, and they just don't seem to know or care about that. And it's just, again, black hole. Just winds up being a black hole.
Yeah.
Okay, we gotta wrap up, so let's just throw out a few possibilities for betting odds on this. In the next year or so, with Adult Swim, broadcasting, or maybe streaming, I don't know. I'm not even gonna speculate on what Adult Swim Canada is gonna do about streaming, which is currently nothing.
I would say 1001, it's just going to continue to be...
Just like, get nothing?
Nothing is guaranteed. Like, I wouldn't take that bet. Yeah. We'll just keep getting nothing.
What about the possibility that we do get the co-pros simulcast?
I feel like maybe simulcast... Uzumaki's going to be a real test. If we get Uzumaki first... Because Uzumaki or Blade Runner, these are both things that, like, you can't... These are like Blade Runner. It's hard to say would get more. It's hard to say it would get more media buzz. But the thing is, both of them. Let me finish. Both of them are going to be notable enough that their absence would be very obvious because they'd be the kind of stuff that's otherwise going to be getting write-ups and media stuff. So, I would hope because their absence would be so blatant that there's high probability. So I'd like to say like that's a 5-1. We'll get it simulcast. Not with any sort of packaging. Packaging would be a 50-1, 100-1. But like, I feel like they're just too big to leave be. Now, in practice.
that also raises another question. If they do have access to this content, are they skittish enough about anime to pick and choose which ones they run? Like, are they gonna opt for Blade Runner because it has the popular tie-in that
I feel like
that some upper level person at Chorus recognizes and skip Uzumaki because they don't know what the fuck that shit is? Or are they gonna just do as they did with all Adult Swim content and not discriminate content that is original and part of the library and simulcast it?
Yeah. It's hard to say if they like pick and choose seems weird.
What do you think the odds are that they would run Blade Runner but not Uzumaki?
Assuming that they've already going to run something. One but not the other? Pretty likely.
Yeah?
2-to-1 odds. Like, I feel like that's pretty... I wouldn't, it's possible enough that if they were going to run a thing, that they would then discriminate. So given the initial 5-to-1, then I guess you say it's technically 10-to-1, but yeah, I don't know. It's like it seems like given the first set, getting only one seems possible. And then that one being Blade Runner, much more likely, like 75% Blade Runner over 90% only Blade Runner versus 10% only Uzumaki. And the only reason why I would say that the reverse is possible is I feel like Uzumaki might be something they're in a position to really have really strongly, whereas like maybe Blade Runner, there's some sort of other consideration or pressure on licensing for that. So that ends up in some sort of different bag. Like Blade Runner is notable enough that I could see them saying like, well actually we want that to somehow stream through HBO Max's set of connections. Like now that there is synergy, the patterns are broken.
Yeah, that's the other thing, because HBO Max originals are now in the wheelhouse of Bell.
Right.
So this could if Warner...
Actually, there's a strong possibility, if I were to say if we don't get it, that being driven by, some sort of licensing nightmare combination of, well, Cartoon Network commissioned it, but we're going to treat it like an HBO Max original.
Exactly, yeah.
And therefore it just ends up completely in rights hell for Canada.
Yeah.
50% chance.
You know what?
If we don't get it, half of of our possibilities of why we don't get it, I'd assign half of the probability to that to being literally,
you know what?
Rights hell.
There's a bet I would make.
Yeah.
Rights hell for Toonami.
And I wouldn't take that bet because I feel like I stand a good chance of losing it.
Yeah.
I feel like rights hell for Toonami originals is entirely plausible with the new synergistic Warner, for better or worse. I'd love for this to be one of our dramatically wrong predictions.
Yeah.
And it just turns up nicely on any service. I mean, again, there's always a possibility for some of this stuff that eventually are just like Canada's effort we already have an anime footprint in Canada with Crunchyroll, fuck it. And I'd actually kind of prefer that. Because, even over necessarily Adult Swim, because I think younger generations just aren't picking up cable enough. So to make sure that people are being exposed to these things, there's an incredible level of value of these things being in streaming services.
So it's worth emphasizing these are going to end up on Crunchyroll eventually. But if Fooly Cooly was any indication, there's probably going to be a delay of several months.
But I feel like that may end up being, that's probably realistically, that's probably for the best. Not everybody's got cable, and I don't blame it. It's a lot of cost to add for people who are doing gig economy work. Take and skip the dishes around. I'm not gonna it shouldn't be considered a bougie thing, but it is, because wages are stagnant. But it isn't stagnant. Housing costs in the Lower Mainland in Toronto. So towards that end, it's all putting it on a service that everybody's got, if they're into genre stuff, is probably a good move. And also very reliable. Put it this way, it solves so many problems that otherwise somebody in Warner explicitly has to deal with somebody in Chorus or Bell to deal with, versus just saying, our partner has it. Done.
Yeah. All right, we got to wrap up.
Yeah.
Carl, thanks for coming on. Where can folks find you on social media, and also anything to promote?
I've got I just dropped a new drum and bass album, Corey Timeout. That's up on all major services. I've got a new nerd Corey-ish album, Just You Wait and See, coming out on April 20th, with singles being dropped every 5 days leading into that, including a song about anime darling of the season, Isaacen.
What? I've never heard of it.
I'm
kidding.
That's what you get at Adult Swim.
We're all watching it. It's wonderful.
Yes. Keep in mind, we're talking about the animated Isaacen.
Yes, by the time you listen to it, you may be watching the Idle Vehicle live action, Aizukin, which is, on track to start, I think in April.
Yeah. Coincidentally.
Yeah.
And so yeah, they've got that on deck, and that's, it's obviously KarlROlson.com, Karl R. Olson, KarlRolson on all of the major social media sites, and ultraclassroom.com for the music that I'm also on Spotify, Tidal, YouTube, everything.
Yeah. And, Karl is of course also responsible for the theme song of this show, which you're probably hearing right now. And thanks for listening to Zon in Canada. You can find me on Twitter @JBetteridge, or you can email me, zonandcanada@gmail.com. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, or Google Play, or Spotify, or whatever, podcast.
SoundCloud gang.
On whatever podcast, thing you use. And yeah, if you know anyone who might like this show, please recommend it to them. See you again.